Subscribe to our channel for the mysteries and stay for the stories.
The year was 1971. It was November 24th, and Flight 305 was scheduled to be on its way from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, a 30-minute journey. It was just a regular day, and it was just a regular flight. Until it wasn't. Any crime buff or fan of unsolved mysteries will tell you that the enigmatic case of D.B. Cooper is up there with the best of them. How was an average man not able to only hijack an aeroplane, but then completely disappear without a trace? And how has he been able to remain hidden to this day? In this video, we're going to be discussing the mystery that is D.B. Cooper, who he was, how he stole an aeroplane, and what on earth happened to him afterwards. Let's start with the man himself. Who was D.B. Cooper? Well, D.B. Cooper is not his real name. The name that he gave when purchasing his ticket was Dan Cooper, but this is not his true identity either. By all accounts, Cooper looked like a pretty regular guy. He appeared to be in his mid-40s with dark hair and dark eyes. Cooper got onto a plane quietly, wearing a business suit and tie for the occasion. While waiting for the plane to take off, Cooper ordered a drink. He settled in and the plane took off, as does the story. Once the plane was in the air, Cooper got the attention of Florence Schaffner, a flight attendant. He handed Schaffner a note, which she initially dismissed because she assumed he was just trying to give her his phone number, something that Schaffner was all too familiar with. It wasn't until Cooper politely said to her, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb," that Schaffner took a look at the scrap piece of paper Cooper had given to her. Written in all capital letters, the note said that she had to sit next to Cooper because of the bomb he had with him. When she did so, Cooper showed her the bomb. It was in the seemingly innocuous briefcase he'd carried with him onto the plane, and Schaffner described it as being made of 8 red cylinders attached to a large battery with insulated wiring. Cooper not only had a bomb, he had demands. $200,000, which is over $1 million in today's money. 4 parachutes, 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle so that the plane could be refueled before he took off again. In his note, Cooper said that the request must be fulfilled. No funny stuff or I'll do the job. A distressed Schaffner informed the pilots of the situation. William A. Scott, the pilot of the aeroplane, contacted air traffic control of the nearby Seattle-Tacoma airport and let them know what was going on. It was swiftly agreed that the ransom would be paid to Cooper, and the police and FBI were immediately contacted. At this time, none of the other 36 passengers of the aircraft knew what was going on. They were only informed that their arrival in Seattle would be delayed due to a small mechanical malfunction. It was 2 hours before the plane landed, as the pilots circled the Puget Sound long enough for the police and FBI to arrive with all the money and the parachutes for Cooper. The ransom money was carefully organized by the FBI. They gathered it all in unmarked $20 bills, each of them photographed. The Seattle police were in charge of the parachutes, and oddly enough, Cooper wanted civilian parachutes instead of military ones. Cooper was described by flight attendants as calm and polite. He apparently never became angry, demanding, or nervous during the wait for the plane to land. He even went so far as to attempt to tip the flight attendant who bought him another drink, and to order meals for the flight crew. On the ground, Cooper exchanged the passengers for the money and the parachutes. The FBI sharpshooters watched his every move, waiting for something to happen that would require their deadly precision. Nothing did. Cooper got what he wanted, and after releasing the passengers, kept most of the crew on board. After refueling, the plane was back in the air and on its way to Mexico. What was strange was that Cooper ordered the aeroplane to fly low, at only 10,000 feet, and that it fly as slow as possible without stalling the engine, which was only 115 miles per hour. Even more strange was his request that the landing gear of the plane remain in the takeoff landing position during flight, that the wing flaps be lowered by 15 degrees, the cabin remain unpressurized, and the rear exit doors remain open and staircase extended. And so the plane began its journey to Mexico. going slowly and flying low. Cooper was not alone though. The authorities were on his tail, and Cooper's plane was followed by 2 F-106 fighter aircraft and a Lockheed T-33. They all flew for around 20 minutes until 8 p.m. Cooper called everyone into the cockpit. Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant that Cooper had brought back on board, noticed that he was tying a rucksack full of money around his waist. It was then that Cooper disappeared. Wearing 2 parachutes, Cooper opened the cabin door, stood on the stairs, which are the ones that allowed passengers to get in and out at the back of the plane, and then jumped and was gone, seemingly forever. D.B. Cooper's disappearance is certainly a dramatic one, and it leaves us with so many unanswered questions. The FBI launched an intensive investigation known as NORJAC, Northwest Hijack, and by their own admission, that investigation has been one of the longest and most exhaustive investigations in FBI history. In fact, the investigation has gone on for so long with so little uncovered that the FBI have officially moved on to other priorities. So who was Cooper? And what happened to him? We may never know for sure, but there are several theories. We already know that Cooper's name is neither DB nor Dan. Dan Cooper was the alias that he gave the airport when buying a plane ticket, and it turned into DB after a reporter confused the name with one of the initial suspects, and that mistake stuck. During the first 5 years of the NORJAC investigation, the FBI examined over 800 different suspects. However, most of the leads came to nothing. They also performed extensive searches of the area where Cooper jumped from the plane, but apart from the skeleton of a murdered teenage girl from an unrelated crime, nothing of note was found. The evidence that the FBI originally had to work with was a very accurate physical description of Cooper: a tie clip, 2 parachutes and some fingerprints. The DNA evidence on the tie was able to rule out some of the suspects. However, a few years later, in 1980, some packets of Cooper's ransom money were found buried in the sand on the banks of the Columbia River, near the site where Cooper jumped from the plane. The bills were very damaged, and no other evidence was found on the site. It is theorized that the bills may have washed downstream, perhaps even at a date after the hijacking, and were not actually buried in the sand by Cooper himself. The FBI initially suspected that Cooper must have been familiar with Washington, because he made some comments about the geography of the area. They also thought he might have been a military paratrooper, but then discounted that theory for 2 reasons. The parachute jump Cooper undertook was so dangerous, and one of the parachutes Cooper had was actually sewn shut, but he had not realized. Some also believe he may have just been a thrill seeker. However, it is clear that even if he was not a military paratrooper, Cooper at least knew a lot about planes, perhaps serving as a cargo loader in the Air Force. Also, Cooper was a very organized criminal. He made sure to blend in well, not antagonize any of the staff on the plane, and even considered what outfit to wear in order to be more successful getting a ride if he was hitchhiking away from the scene. FBI agents believed that Cooper's alias may have come from a Belgian comic book series about a Royal Canadian Air Force test pilot known as Dan Cooper. Because the Cooper of the comic books performed daring stunts like jumping from planes with a parachute, it was supposed that maybe this was why Cooper chose that name. As the comics were popular in Canada, there was a theory that Cooper may have been Canadian, or at least spent some time overseas. Other likely suspects did begin to emerge as the investigation continued. One was Richard Floyd McCoy, who had hijacked a plane only a few months after Cooper. They thought that maybe McCoy was committing the same crime again, but the investigation into McCoy was dropped. This was because McCoy didn't match the physical description given of Cooper, and was home the day of the hijacking, having Thanksgiving dinner with his family. A man named Lyle Christensen believed that Cooper was actually his dead brother, Kenneth. Christensen came to this conclusion after watching a documentary about Cooper, and then attempted to get in contact with the director, Nora Ephron, to make a movie about the whole thing. He thought that Ephron could give the movie the heart it required. The FBI dismissed Christensen's claims, so he hired a private investigator to uncover any evidence. According to Lyle Christensen, when Kenneth was on his deathbed, he told his brother that he had an important secret, but he did not tell Lyle what it actually was. While Kenneth Christensen did have parachuting experience because of his time as a paratrooper in the army and did seem to have a lot of money, all of this evidence is circumstantial. Kenneth Christensen's parachuting experience was actually above what Cooper had, and his money was all obtained in legitimate ways. He was ruled out as a suspect by the FBI. And then there's the man who claimed to be D.B. Cooper himself, Dwayne Webber. On his deathbed, Webber allegedly told his wife, Jo, that he was the mysterious hijacker. Jo also claimed that Webber had nightmares about the hijacking. There is some circumstantial evidence that may link Webber to the crime. He went to the same area in 1979 where Cooper's cash was found in 1980. But DNA evidence has not confirmed anything, and the FBI do not consider Webber a suspect. These aren't the only men accused of being D.B. Cooper. There's Richard Rackstraw, who was the center of a theory by Thomas J. Colbert, who even published a book about it. There's Jack Coffett, Lynn Doyle Cooper, Robert Lepsey, John List, Ted Mayfield, and so many more. Even women have been suspected of being D.B. Cooper. It was thought that maybe Barbara Dayton, a librarian and recreational pilot, had dressed as a man and orchestrated the whole thing to get back at the airline industry, who would not let her be a commercial pilot. She even admitted to knowing where the money was hidden, although later took back what she said. Really, investigators don't have any concrete idea who the hijacker was. So why is it so hard to track down D.B. Cooper? What actually happened to him? Well, many investigators think it's likely that Cooper could not be found because he was actually dead. This was the FBI standpoint on the case from the very start. This theory has been held up well for a long time, because not only was Cooper not wearing appropriate clothing for parachute jumping, the parachute he used was not able to be maneuvered easily. He was also jumping in incredibly rough weather, and would have landed straight in the dense forest below. Even if he did manage to survive the landing, there was a high chance that he simply died of exposure to the freezing Washington weather. Even if D.B. Cooper didn't survive, his legacy lives on. There is an annual D.B. Cooper celebration in Ariel, Washington, near where Cooper was theorized to have landed. Many places all throughout the Pacific Northwest hold look-alike competitions and use Cooper for promotional material. Cooper's story is featured in songs and in movies. There was even a theory that Don Draper from Mad Men was a fictitious version of Cooper in the universe of the show. It's clear that the mystery surrounding D.B. Cooper is not going to go away anytime soon, nor is the public's fascination with it. What are your thoughts about D.B. Cooper? Do you have any interesting theories of your own? If so, let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more interesting videos like this one.